Okay, well, good morning, or if you're joining us from Australia, good afternoon, and welcome to what is the launch of the Australian Vietnam Health Tech Linkages program. I'm Rob Scott, the Managing Director of Australia Asia Technology Incubator. And it's my pleasure to welcome you here today, and on behalf of our group, and also our speakers and our guests. I'll just a bit of housekeeping pleasure first. If everyone can sort of just stay on mute for the time being, it makes it much easier if there's no background noise. If you have questions, there's a chat function. You can post those in the chat, and we'll try to get to the questions at the end of the session today, which is basically 1 hour. We'll allow about 10 to 15 minutes time for the questions and answers. So obviously we want to make sure that everyone has any questions and queries, and those get answered. Basically very keen, as I said, to get started. And before I do, I'll introduce sort of, we'll just mention our speakers today. Rebecca Ball.
Sorry, Rob. Can I have a few words, please? Just only few words. Okay, sorry. Xin chào các anh các chị. Tôi là Lê Thành Huy, cho phép tôi xin có một vài lời nhỏ thôi. Trước đây thì tôi đã, theo như thông báo với các chị, thì chúng tôi có chuẩn bị về phiên dịch. Thế nhưng thật không may về kỹ thuật là chỉ vài phút trước khi bắt đầu thì cái việc phiên dịch nó không thể thực hiện được. Cho nên là xin phép các chị là trong buổi này thì sẽ làm trực tiếp bằng tiếng Anh, và chúng tôi sẽ xin gửi tư liệu sau ạ. Xin cảm ơn. Okay, thanks, Rob. That's it.
Thank you.
I just informed them that your interpreter is not available for these sessions.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, I was getting. So Mr. Hui, who represents Dongsun and Investments, is our. We're very proud to say that they're our Vietnam local partner for this program, which of course has been funded under DFAT AVEG, which is the Australia Vietnam enhanced economic engagement strategy. We're very pleased to sort of have Kate Chapman here as well, dialing in from Canberra. So Dongsun are the local partners for our program, and we'll get into that a little bit later in terms of what the different aspects are. But unfortunately today, as Mr. Hui has just said, we won't have interpretation for today's session. However, we will have a recording. The session is being recorded, and we will have that available on our website, which we'll post to everyone later. And we'll have a transcript in Vietnamese of that session. So you won't miss out anything important. It'll be there in terms of highlights, and certainly the later sessions that we'll be looking at in terms of the program over the next 12 months, certainly we'll have simultaneous or sequential interpretation and translation for everyone who's interested. Okay, back to the program. So as I was saying, very proud and very happy to welcome Mr. Hui, to welcome our speakers, Rebecca Ball and Nung Tran from Austrade, Matt Salia from RMIT. And I'll be introducing each of these speakers properly a little bit later in today's session. But just basically wanted to start off and give you a little bit of a rundown in terms of who we are, and also hopefully you can see all of that. In terms of the program itself, in terms of AATI, as I mentioned, Australia Asia Technology Incubator has been around for, well, we haven't been around for 20 years, but we certainly, the leadership, which includes myself, have been engaged in Asia in the healthcare market and in official development assistance work for around 20 years. Very focused in terms of working, which is the basis of our program today, in terms of facilitating opportunities for Australian early stage companies, startups, SMEs, and university teams into Asia. And we've done that successfully in previously government funded programs through Hong Kong, through China, we've had about 250 startups and SMEs go through our programs in the last few years for those. And we're also starting in the last year, we've been working with as part of a export hub program with Queensland University of Technology and Life Science Queensland for other markets. And these obviously include ASEAN, but also Japan and Korea. And again, around health tech. So this is life sciences, medical devices, online healthcare solutions, and looking at those opportunities. Very significantly, though, in terms of this particular program, which we termed By a Bridge, and again, it's been funded by DFAT, ABAG's pilot program. This extends these opportunities to a two-way model. So in other words, we're just as focused on this program, and many of you obviously are in Vietnam, in terms of helping your companies, helping you as founders of those, or as university teams, look at opportunities in the Australian market. And we'll be having specific events and boot camps and pitch events coming up later in the program, later this year and next year, to provide you with those opportunities to look at how you can move your business, your technologies into a market like Australia, and what that means for you. Okay, there we go. So today's program, basically, again, and these are Australian times, the welcome introductions we've done in terms of talking about the program, which we'll get to in a minute, and then introducing Rebecca Ball and Nung Tran, basically to talk about the healthcare opportunities in Vietnam, and then Matthew Salia from RMIT talking about the innovation sector in Vietnam, and then obviously hopefully some time for some Q&A at the end. Okay, so in terms of the program structure, as it is for this year and next year, we've obviously got the launch event today, and appreciate that many of you are in lockdown, whether it be in Vietnam or in Australia. So good. Again, thank you very much for joining us. You know, and I know it's difficult, challenging times at the moment. It's a period when healthcare obviously is a very topical, very important part of everyone's life. So we've basically designed this program to, as I said, increase those opportunities, to make those opportunities real and tangible, and to hopefully remove some of the obstacles that get in the way of early stage companies getting their technology, their business invested or partnered, or products or services being sold cross-border. And I've been involved in it for over 20 years. So it's not an easy matter, but it's certainly one that can be achieved if you apply the right approaches, if you look at the right, get the right advice early on. And so we'll be doing that in terms of the boot camps, and we have two of these, as I mentioned, one for Australian startups and early stage companies talking about Vietnam and the opportunities which are here in the market in Vietnam. And then secondly, in terms of the market in Australia, for Vietnam companies, and how that might work. So we'll have two boot camps which are, and these are indicative dates, and again, this might change because of COVID and other issues, but hopefully we'll stick to this. And these will be half-day sort of events, webinar events, but obviously, hopefully also potentially doing some offline sort of meetings and networking as well. And then in terms of looking at after the boot camps, of course, you need to start progressing and working on your business and how you get your business or your technology, yourselves sometimes into this market. And we'll be doing that and linking up with a number of key mentors and advisors we have in our programs, or we have used successfully in the past, as well as those in Vietnam, to help companies through. So both from Australia and Vietnam, we'll be having this one-on-one mentoring sort of coaching sort of sessions as well as part of that. And then that will culminate in a pitch event. Basically, again, two pitch events, one for Australian audiences, for Vietnamese companies, startups, one for Vietnamese audiences for the Australian team. So, and basically we would hope that we can, through that, achieve quite a number of really good, tangible successes and progression for companies in terms of increasing this two-way flow of capital, of knowledge, of communication, and experience. And hopefully also, of course, some of your technologies that you've got, you're developing, you're working on, you have as your businesses, make it a tangible, significant difference in not just your own country, but other countries as well. And that's what we're about. So in terms of, in terms of getting to market, obviously, we're very keen to sort of introduce as part of our programs some really quality key speakers, and we have for today, obviously, a few of those with us, which we're delighted to introduce. And I'll just hand over now in terms of the first speakers we have today, which is from Australia, which is Miss Rebecca Ball and Miss Nguyen Tran. And just want to introduce them just very briefly. Rebecca Ball is the Senior Trade Commissioner for the Vietnam team for Australia. She leads the Vietnamese team there in the country for both Vietnam and Cambodia, and she's actually had over 20 years in engagement with the region, working in both Indonesia and India, but also her first posting in Vietnam was 20 years ago. So obviously a very long history in terms of the market, of the understanding of the economy, of the dynamics that are key to trade and investment, and basically obviously a strong leader in terms of her team, but also a key lynch point in terms of the connection between Australia and Vietnam and the government and economic development. So I'm just not sure who that was, but I was muted everyone again. So Rebecca, I'll just unmute you in a minute. And then I want to also introduce the presenter formerly from Australia for today, which is Ms. Nguyen Tran, who is a business development manager as part of Rebecca's team. And Nguyen joined Australia in 2017, and as a business development manager, obviously her role is working with Australian companies, but also working with Vietnamese companies as well in terms of getting outcomes for those Australian companies, organisations, business leaders that come into the market, into Vietnam. And her key focus is on healthcare and technology. So we're really delighted to get both Rebecca and Nguyen basically here today. So without any further ado, if I can basically go back, and I will try to, there we go. Rebecca, I've just unmuted you and I'll find Nguyen in a second.
Well, good morning, everybody, and xin chào quý vị to everybody who's coming in from Vietnam. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today on this momentous occasion of the launch of the BioBridge project, which is funded through the Australian government. And I'm really pleased to acknowledge my colleague Kate from Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade on the line today. But first off, I'd just like to acknowledge for our Australian counterparts, as well as our Vietnamese counterparts online, that it's a really important, it is such an important program, not only because of the challenges we're all facing during COVID time, but the common problems and the common solutions we all want to work on together creatively through innovation, through health technology and innovation. So I really feel for everybody on the line in Vietnam. I acknowledge my colleague Nguyen Tran up in Hanoi, as well as all the Vietnamese colleagues across the country in Vietnam, and also those on the line from Australia. I look forward to getting to know all the Australian companies and representatives in this space, because it's a really important program for us to support across the two countries with the BioBridge. So just acknowledging we have strong representation on the call today from the Vietnamese government. Really pleased to see representatives from the People's Committee from Hà Giang, from Dang Nai, and the Hoa Binh People's Committee Incubator Centre. Really lovely to have you here, and really pleased that we can work together across our respective administrations. Really delighted to see we've got about 16 different universities and startup, innovation hubs and and startup centres that are aligned to universities in this space. Great, strong representation, and just looking at those who are on the line, fantastic calibre of the universities and colleges. So really, really great to have you here. And also we have representatives from half a dozen private sector companies who are in the startup space or in joint stock who invest into new products and technologies and innovations. So really great to have you on board. Look forward to getting to know you first. But first off, I'll just make a couple of comments that the Vietnam, the landscape of the healthcare sector is changing. The strong economic growth and the population growth, particularly those coming through, it's about 80% under the age of 40, and really high in professional education, moving much more, growth, very much growth of education and investment by both individuals, but also the government in the STEM space, healthcare, technology, IT. It's really, really impacting on a step change for how companies are also looking to draw skills and expertise from these universities. The middle class is getting much more demanding and demanding higher quality medical solutions and treatments. They're more digitally literate, they're spending more on their healthcare and looking for more digital health services, which is absolutely transforming the sector. The actual healthcare expenditure on GDP is around 5.9% over the past few years. We expect that to grow, and in 2020 it was around 22 billion of the budget was expended on the healthcare sector. The Vietnamese government has issued a number of policies to develop the healthcare centre. Notable recent policies include the Vietnam Health Program, which was launched by the Prime Minister in 2019 to improve the lifespan, wellbeing and quality of the life of the Vietnamese people. We had 3 goals. 1, to promote a healthy diet and lifestyle with appropriate nutrition and increased physical activity, baseline. 2, to raise public awareness for behavioural changes to prevent health-related risks, so risk reduction. And 3, to provide better primary healthcare, services to reduce the burden on the non-communicable diseases of the country. So very much to reduce the load on the public health sector. The other policy that was announced is the National Healthcare Digital Transformation Program, which will run through to 2025, which was issued by the Ministry of Health, which is really focusing a roadmap by the government of what objectives the government wants to achieve with the sector in digital healthcare, digital society, and broader digitalisation to make sure all the systems are joining up together to prevent increased spread of risk of disease, and really focusing on how they can use digital technology for medical diagnostics and also for monitoring of patients. So these factors are really starting to underpin and strengthen the capability and capacity of the sector to then take on more and more different creative innovations and technologies. On that note, I'm going to pass to my colleague, Ms. Nguyen, who I'm really delighted to see on the screen there with her beautiful smiling face, to talk a bit more about some specific opportunities. Then we'll pass back to Rob and the team. And again, well done to Rob and the team and to your partner, Long Sun Investments, for successfully winning this project. So I'll cross it now to Nguyen. Thank you, Nguyen.
Thanks, Rebecca. Over to you, Nguyen.
Thanks, Rebecca and Rob. I will share my screen. Okay, let me know when you have seen my screen.
Yes, that's fine, Nguyen.
Okay, great. So thanks, Rebecca, for a great overview. I'm now going to give you a little bit of a deep dive into the Vietnam healthcare market and opportunities. I will first go through with you the key drivers of the growth in the Vietnam healthcare, followed by recent key trends, and I will end with talking a little bit about the business opportunities available for companies in the healthcare space in Vietnam. First, for the key drivers of growth, you could see that the drivers for demand for healthcare services are twofold. Number one is demographic and economic factors that drive healthcare spending in Vietnam. In the last 20 years in Vietnam, you could see that Vietnam has seen a great annual GDP growth rate of about 6.4%. And this has made Vietnam one of the fastest growing economies in Southeast Asia. Not just this, in terms of population, the Vietnam population is also growing. Last year, 2020, Vietnam has 97 million people in the country, and it is forecast to reach 103 million in 2025. As Rebecca mentioned just now, Vietnam is also known for a rapidly expanding middle class. Vietnam got its middle income status in 2010, and it is forecast that the Vietnam, half the population, 50% population, will join the global middle class population by 2035. So as Vietnam becomes richer, you will see that there are going to be a rise in demand for healthcare services. At the same time, you will see a rise in people's expectations for higher quality medical treatment. Another factor that drives the demand for healthcare services in Vietnam is patient pain points. And there are three things I wanted to talk about here. First is access to care. And what I mean by this is access to care is not equal across areas in Vietnam. For example, in rural areas in Vietnam, there are places where there is still a lack of qualified healthcare professionals. And there are places where people still have to travel distance to get good quality care in big cities. The second pain point is quality of care, and this means two things. Number one is the quality of services you get from your doctors when you visit hospital. Your consultation time with doctors could be short, and there are many times where your past medical records are not available. And also, there could be a significant variation in standard of care and the quality of medical equipment between provincial and national hospitals. And lastly is patient experience. It's no longer new news that in Vietnam, the public hospitals are facing two problems. One is overcrowding, and the second is high occupancy rate. And this is particularly serious in big cities. So this is the overview of two main key drivers of healthcare services in Vietnam in the last 10 years. So with the demand for healthcare services, this leads us to the topic of healthcare expenditure. Healthcare remains a national priority for Vietnam, and this is evidenced by the increasing government health spending as a share of GDP and also as a share of total government spending in the last 10 years. You could see from the graph that this graph shows the projection of healthcare expenditure in Vietnam from 2018 to 2028, and it is projected that the growth will be roughly 11% per year, and this is pretty high. Another data is Vietnam healthcare expenditure in the past 10 years has been hovering around 5.9 to 6% plus as a percentage of GDP. And this is one of the highest in ASEAN countries. Okay, so what are the recent trends that we see in healthcare in Vietnam? I will talk briefly about three key main trends that we see in Vietnam in the last few years. The first is the shift of Vietnam shifting from communicable disease to non-communicable disease in Vietnam. And what I mean by this is cancer, cardiovascular conditions, for example, are becoming more and more common in Vietnam. And the cost of death causing by NCDs was 77% in 2016. And this is a rise from only 68% 6 years earlier. And what this means is that this has created a greater need for long-term and more coordinated healthcare services in Vietnam, specifically catering to this disease. The second trend we have been seeing is the aging population trend. You might know that Vietnam is still now a very young population. You know, the median age in Vietnam is only 30 years old. However, it is predicted that the median age in Vietnam is still going to rise to 42 years old by 2050. And UNESCO has identified Vietnam as one of the world's fastest aging societies. And this trend will not only create more burden on the healthcare facilities, but it also create more demand for services to care for people who are of the older age. The last trend I wanted to talk about today is the trend for digitalization in Vietnam. And you could see that I have put here 6 key main sort of internal enablers that allow Vietnam to capture and being well positioned to adopt digital health solutions. A main few data that you want to remember: Vietnam has very high penetration rate in smartphone and mobile phone subscription, very high internet penetration rate with quite wide coverage of internet networks across the country. So these are the internal factors that help Vietnam to be in a good position to adopt digital health solutions. At the same time, we do not forget the very supportive government policy that is important to help push Vietnam in a much faster track towards digitalization across the country. So with all these factors coming together, I would say are creating more and more great potential business opportunities for not only Australian companies, but also Vietnamese companies to develop products, services, and solutions to help meet these demands and help Vietnam tackle many of the healthcare challenges. I put down here 4 main areas of opportunities that I think is worth highlighting. Number 1 is medical device, digital health, health services, and health education and training. Medical device, for example, 90% of the medical device in Vietnam is imported. So Vietnam is very open to receive high quality and advanced medical devices from foreign companies. Digital health is another area of great growth in the next 10 years. It will be anything, be it telemedicine services, applying advanced technologies in the medical treatment and examination in Vietnam, or if you could have a software that helps to increase operational efficiencies of hospitals in Vietnam, or it could be a patient services that allow anyone to book their appointment better. Anything surrounding making the healthcare system more efficient and making the patient experience better is welcomed in Vietnam. For health services here, it means a lot of different things. It could range from services, for example, rehabilitation services, to emergency care services or smart hospital services. And finally, health education and training. You know, as long as the country needs services, then there's a space for education and training. So the areas of education and training is wide, and it could be ranging from nurse training to a digital hospital to aged care, etc. So this is an overview of 4 main areas of opportunities for companies to operate in healthcare space in Vietnam. And Austrade will be welcoming further conversations should you have questions in the coming months when you are in the program. I'll close my presentation here. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nung. And also thank you to Rebecca for 2 great presentations there in terms of the opportunities and really highlighting, I guess, the 2-way flow that we're talking about and we're looking to encompass from both the Australian and obviously from the Vietnamese side in terms of into Australia as well, in terms of enhancing those opportunities around digital health, medical health, health services, encapsulating in terms of the growth in the Vietnam market, but also equally helping to foster innovative companies, teams, startups in Vietnam into Australia. an organisation which has been obviously leading the forefront now for decades, actually, in terms of the Vietnam Australian relationship, is RMIT, and we're very happy, very privileged to have Mr. Matthew Salia, who's the director of RMIT Activator, with us today. So Matt is basically not just the director of Activator in Australia, but also has a team in Vietnam, which I'm sure you'll talk about, but has been really and the organisation of RMIT is really at the heart of entrepreneurship in both Australian ecosystem, particularly in healthcare, which is obviously Melbourne has been, a key focal area for healthcare technology in Australia. And RMIT is obviously one of the leading universities in Melbourne, but also obviously through the Activator program in Vietnam as well. And Matt's worked over the last 25 years with hundreds of startups, SMEs, large organizations. He's helped make 5, I think, spin-outs from those companies, and worked a lot on sort of social innovation, impact, and they're very, very experienced in terms of both Australia, Asia, and US as well. So what I'll do is to hand over to Matt. Nong, if you wanted to sort of stop your screen sharing, and then Matt can sort of start his, and then to talk about the thanks, Nong, the overall overview in terms of the implications, I guess, or the overview of the innovation sector, basically in Vietnam and also Australia as well. Now, I think I've muted you again, Matt, so I'll just unmute you.
You've cut me out, have you?
No, you're good. I thought I did it by mistake, but I haven't, so it's fantastic. So over to you, mate.
Thank you, Rob, and Rebecca and Nung. Thanks for that great presentation. I think I'll have to adjust some of mine to cover it off. But again, really pleased to be here and excited to see how we can help contribute to the program, as I'm sure many of you on the call. So I'll just share my screen. I've got a brief presentation, and we'll just get that up. Does that come up there? There we go.
Yep, all good.
All good. So, so again, thank you very much. I really appreciate the chance to talk to you today. And as Rob said, Activate is the heart of entrepreneurship at RMIT, not only in Melbourne, where I'm based here at the moment, but also across our multiple campuses in Vietnam, our Barcelona campus, and our Singapore campus. So we run a range of activities across that innovation and entrepreneurial space, from accelerators to ideation hackathons to corporate innovation programs. There's a range of activities that we do, and I just today wanted to touch on RMIT and RMIT Vietnam and the depth and history of our organisation there, but then also some observations and looking at some of my esteemed participants on the call. I'll probably no doubt miss a few key elements of the innovation ecosystem, but certainly some amazing opportunities there that will build on many of the points that Nung and Rebecca raised as well. So RMIT Vietnam, as you can see, was founded in 2000, and we had our first student start in 2001. So a 20-year anniversary we're currently celebrating, and so excited to have such a wonderful relationship with a country emerging as it is to the economic powerhouse we see today. So we've got those 3 locations there. You see Ho Chi Minh, Hanoi, and an English language centre in Da Nang, which of course is growing faster than any other area of our business at the moment. We've got more than 9,500 students across the country, 700 staff, and somewhere in the vicinity of 16,000 alumni now. So a really amazing journey over those 20 years to really provide that educational uplift that's seen the country emerge in such a dramatic and impactful way. We've got we offer a lot of scholarships, obviously, into the broader community, about $20 million worth annually. We have a very key role in the sort of share of voice and the education market in Vietnam. So I think that influence to what is happening in the education ecosystem of Vietnam is really important, and something that RMIT places a lot of focus on. Higher education rankings as a university, we're very well regarded. That number 3 ranking in impact is, drawing on Rob's point, this very strong focus we see in students coming through today around impact, and certainly the health and medtech area is one where impact is probably somewhat most acute. So really high aspirations for our students looking to come into that sort of space as well. Among the top 50 universities in communication and media, we have a very strong design school and digital production school based out of Hanoi, and a range of other things. The World Art and Design with the highest rank in Asia Pacific, which is a really good recognition of that confluence of technology and design that's part of RMIT's main brand. As I said, 20 years. You can see the timeline there, and I'm sure the team will share this presentation following. And we're very excited last year and again this year to be working on a Vietnam Leads policy workshop series that's resulted in a new policy institute being established between Australia and Vietnam, which we think will continue to further embed this wonderful history RMIT has with the country. 4 main schools in Vietnam: business and management, communications and design, science and technology, English, and university partnerships. Those first 3, of course, innovation happens at the edges of experiences and disciplines, and we like to bring our students together in those cross-disciplinary, transdisciplinary environments to really unlock value wherever we can. Again, by the numbers, I've gone over this a little bit, so I won't dwell on it, but more than 700 staff. We have a large facility in Ho Chi Minh City, which we're expanding. Very excited about the prospects of an industry hub there, focused far more on the digital technologies, and again, that has a lovely crossover to the health and medtech space that we're talking about here today. Innovation in Vietnam. One of the wonderful things about RMIT, we're a large organisation, as I've said, 92,000 students and a significant footprint around the globe, is we have all these innovation assets, and we I guess galvanise those around 3 main themes: education, social, and urban futures, and they enable us to really hone in on particular areas of innovation effect that we can have. So whilst those green bubbles you see on the outside are a range of assets, Code, Centre of Digital Excellence, is based in our Ho Chi Minh campus there. The Health Transformation Lab, particularly important to this program, is based in the CBD North, in the north of the Central Business District of Melbourne. But all of these assets are deployed into Vietnam to really leverage and increase our effect in the innovation ecosystem there. So you'll see Activator there. We have a great connection with Studio V out of Hanoi. We have a very significant social innovation, the social impact hub, which I've mentioned, which has presences in Melbourne and Barcelona. And then a range of other things around emerging technology like cybersecurity and blockchain, where we would see the confluence between these platform technologies, these new game changers really being brought to bear for some of the emerging startups that we hope to see benefit from this program. So I put this in, Nong, but you've done a much better job of talking about Vietnam's economic outlook. I love this slide from the Kantar World panel, but really showing that strong growth through what was a pretty dramatic year for everybody last year. And whilst not without its hurdles this year with lockdowns and shifts happening around the world, that strong economic position Vietnam has is something to be envied, and certainly is around the world. I think the trade deals that Vietnam and the government are inking there are really enabling these opportunities to be brought to bear in this relationship with DFAT. In this example, program is one such thing. We know that lots of multinationals are moving out of China into Vietnam, establishing bigger or indeed their first operations here. That can only help, that infusion of capital, infusion of talent, infusion of technology can only help seed further that wonderful emerging innovation ecosystem. And again, despite those headwinds of the pandemic, that internet economy, and Nung mentioned that, grew by 16% to reach 14 billion in 2020. And that's, as you can see there, greater than Indonesia and just behind Singapore. And those two have sort of been bellwethers for the region. So a tremendous example of the direction of travel there. The GDP of that near 7% mark is certainly enviable around the world. This all feeds into this innovation ecosystem. So we see a wonderful emerging confluence of activities in Vietnam, which I think are worth just sort of touching on. As you can see there, I've sort of broken that into three main areas, but emerging capital infusion. So $50 million plus investments from a whole range of industry players, and I'll talk about them a little bit later, and growing funding commitments from venture firms. I think 500 startups that announced last year, an $815 million fund alone across a number of corporates into Vietnam. That is a tremendous indicator of positivity and optimism for new creation of innovative industries, innovative businesses in an economy. Again, we've talked about strong GDP growth, that internet penetration you heard of, the demographic trends, the large number of the population under 35, and that tenacity, the strong education system of which RMIT loves playing the role that we do, and of course, really strong government support for ecosystem building and incubator and business creation services. And there's a much more sophisticated ecosystem developing because of all those factors. More programs, I think there's something like 38 business incubators across Vietnam, depending on how you count them and where you're looking, and much more experience around it. So one of the really important things coming into an emerging market economy in terms of an innovation ecosystem is that recycling of talent, recycling of capital, and we're seeing that in a very significant way in Vietnam. And again, looking across there, the amount of invested capital, a number of tech deals done, has grown sixfold from 2018 to 2020. That's extraordinary growth, and again, a really strong indicator of just how capable the economy is in Vietnam. Oh, my apologies. So, of course, the government plays a very critical role in this and has been very open about supporting the innovation ecosystem, hosting many events and sort of infusing capital to really catalyse that activity. Project 844 under MIST, or MOST rather, has that mission to build the ecosystem through to 2025. And of course, you've got the National Innovation Centre under MIPS announcements, I think about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, to build a $82 million site outside of Hanoi. Now, of course, that's slowed somewhat because of the pandemic, but all of these assets create momentum and catalyze activity that was already emerging around this space. So that tone at the top really plays a pivotal role in proliferating that startup scene. And a good example is TechFest. You know, that's an annual event organised by the Ministry of Science and Technology, has over 5,500 attendees and 200, 300 plus investors present at that event. And that type of activity is a really strong indicator of growth and ecosystem support. And then finally, of course, industry. As I said, there's probably about 38 operating business incubators. About 72% of them are focused around Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. And then, of course, they're the two most dynamic ecosystems in the country. But Da Nang is running a close third to that, with a focus on agri-tech and food and tourism and so on. Again, these are great indicators, and it's wonderful to see Viet Startup Incubator on the call today as well. But these large companies coming in, Vingroup, FPT, Masan, Vietjet, coming in and providing corporate venture capital, beginning to catalyse programs, provide sponsorship. VTEL have been involved in that for a number of years. And then, of course, the co-working and incubation spaces. All of these are necessary ingredients to create that momentum, to catalyse activity, to create these founders, to create new businesses and ultimately new industries. So there's really, really interesting trends happening there. Again, for developing markets where there's several generations of serial entrepreneurs coming back, I think the term in Vietnam is sea turtles. The very successful entrepreneurs coming back after studying and beginning their ventures overseas. Tiki is a wonderful example. An Australian graduate founded that, coming back to Vietnam to build up the ecosystem, to build up the business locally. And they're bringing not only their cultural and their historical linkages to the country, they're bringing new insights and new ways of working from other markets and other experiences they've had. That's a really potent combination to build a dynamic innovation ecosystem. So I might leave it there, Rob. Pass back to you. Again, I feel somewhat humbled by the presence of the people on the call, but there is a wonderful opportunity, I think, to really do something special in the program, and we're really pleased to be a part of it.
Wonderful, thank you, Matt. And look, that's some fantastic sort of statistics there, and a really good presentation. I think a couple that stood out for me was that that $815 million fund from sort of 500 startups, which of course are a great sort of international group. We've done some work with them in the past, and really good to see that they're and all the obviously the local, international sort of corporates and ecosystem sort of key stakeholders are investing even more into this market, which we think personally is a great one, and has great opportunities in terms of not just domestically but also in relationship with Australia as well. Look, so thank you again for that. We might turn now, we've got about 10 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes left. And in terms of just some sort of general Q&A, and I'll go back to my little slide here. So basically, oops, where are we? Okay. So basically, in terms of questions and next steps, one question actually I had, which, and I might put you, Rebecca, and also maybe Matt on the spot, just in terms of we talked a lot and painted a fantastic picture of Vietnam as an economy, as an ecosystem, in terms of innovation opportunities for Australian companies. I was wondering, in terms of the other way, your thoughts on in the opportunities in Australia for Vietnam companies in the health tech sector. I don't know if you wanted to sort of, either of you wanted to touch on that. Maybe Rebecca, if you wanted to sort of.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. Rob, my camera coming back on again? I can't see myself, but I presume I'm there somewhere.
Should be.
Okay. So. Yeah, that was really fascinating. I loved hearing our other speakers too. Look, I think the first thing, just to preface anything around two-way opportunities, is that the Australian government, across all tiers of government, actually, has a strong priority in Australia on the healthcare sector and building capability and capacity and seeking partnerships to drive efficiencies and better solutions for patient-centred care, particularly at this time, knowing that all systems are under significant stress. So I can say that through our combined networks across Austrade, DFAT, as well as our counterparts in whether it's Department of Industry, driving systems development, but also through the Department of Health, looking to partner both at a government level as well as a commercial level, and applying commercial solutions to fix some of these wicked problems. That's where we need these kind of solutions. We do see opportunities for Vietnam to consider how we might present investment opportunities to our Vietnamese counterparts, which could then have a two-way benefit by way of, whether it's in medical trials or diagnostics or systems management. We do have, as you know, Rob, significant expertise through the private medical sector, particularly, who have set up offshore with the likes of Ramsay and others, and devices such as Cochlear and the like. And obviously, clinical trials in this is always paramount, and people like proteomics in here in Western Australia, where I'm currently calling from, really keen to look at opportunities for partnerships, both at a company to institution, but also working across the tiers of public, private sector solutions. So that's certainly something, you know, our team in Austrade onshore, we have a focused team on healthcare and medical, and significant depth of experience there across Australia. And when, as I said, we do work across the state jurisdictions, obviously, and then with our counterparts across government. So there's certainly, as we move through this program, once we get to know the participants and their needs and their profiles, we can certainly add a bit more, I guess, depth to those overarching high-level comments, which are really just sort of to set the scene that we're here to help. We've got the networks, we've got the right settings. It's a priority for the Australian government. It's a priority for the Vietnamese government. And there's certainly, with a significant investment within the COVID space of the Australian government with the vaccine rollout into Vietnam, the millions of donations of Australian dollars into the Vietnam immunisation program. It's so critical and imperative that we continue to work on these wicked problems and find some solutions through technology and innovation. So thanks, Rob.
Indeed, thanks, Rebecca. And just on that point as well, of course, Australia's got some fantastic sort of opportunities on the clinical trial space. One of the advantages we have, and of course, doing trials for any company looking to do so from Vietnam in Australia is of course those studies are accepted almost universally, without exception, in US and Europe and UK. And for phase 1 trials, I know because we've been involved in this through the CTN capability, it's a very, very short time to do phase 1 first in man sort of trials, effectively reducing because it goes through an ethics committee as opposed to a formal sort of application, from around 6 to 12 months down to about 6 weeks in terms of the application process. So different from, say, US or Europe. So big factors in terms of you know, the opportunities. And of course, you know, we have great populations from a trial perspective as well. And of course, great researchers in universities like RMIT, Matt. And just wondering if you wanted to add to any of Rebecca's comments there in terms of what you saw as from the early stage opportunities from a two-way perspective from Vietnam into Australia.
Yeah, look, I think they're all really great points. I guess as you say, a lot of our activity, when you think about whether it's student or staff, as in researcher, commercialisation and translation, is early stage, and we talk about, you know, technology readiness levels. They're at the lower end of the spectrum generally. But certainly one of the things, and I called out the Health Transformation Lab as a really good exemplar. That's the, you know, Austrade has landing pads for companies out of Australia going into other markets, and we would like to think of those innovation assets that I mentioned in my presentation as landing pads for discipline-specific opportunities coming in to RMIT, and they act as a galvanising factor. So you look at the Health Transformation Lab, there's very few large providers in Australia that they aren't working with. There's very few large hospitals that they're not working with. We're doing a very big cybersecurity project with St Vincent at the moment. There's a really interesting blood donation project happening with the blood bank here, and I think I mentioned to you, Rob, we ran our Future Founders Comp recently, and one of the most interesting startups out of that was run around blood donation in Vietnam. Had a really interesting way to use social dynamics and technology to really up the rate of blood donation, to sort of gamify and reward that activity. And, you know, we just happened to mention it in one of the open labs at Health Transformation Lab, and sort of the blood bank ears prick up. So I think there are opportunities to explore that. I agree with Rebecca. There's some really solid Australian programs to incentivise that as well. But I think that first step is always just starting these relationships and connections and seeing where they'll go.
Indeed. Thanks, Matt. And I should also mention that, of course, in addition to the focus of this program being on early stage in terms of university teams and startups, it also is open to SMEs. So anyone on the call today who has an existing business in the healthcare, aged care, wellness sort of area, very keen to be working and to talking with you in terms of you know, suitability for the program. And also a bit of a shout out from our behalf to a couple of groups who have been very helpful in terms of getting some of today's attendees online, basically particularly VCCI. So Ms. Lai, Ms. Hui, and of course Thao Griffiths from VCCI Victoria, the Vietnam Chamber of Commerce Industry, very, very important chamber in Vietnam, and obviously very keen to sort of help support this initiative. And similarly with Sam Bo and AusCham Vietnam as well. Thanks to him and his team for again helping to promote the event and our program going forward. Basically, we'd just like to open up the last 5 minutes, I guess, to anyone who has had any questions. If they wanted to sort of, if you wanted to sort of raise your hand on the chat, and then if anyone or just post a question in the chat, we can basically sort of look to hopefully answer that. And of course, you can contact us at the after this event. We'll be putting information on the AATI website in terms of the program. We'll have a video, also an edited video of this recording on the launch on there. So anyone who missed it or came in late, don't worry, it'll be on there. But more importantly, we'll be putting a registration form in terms of the program on our site, which will be available for people to sort of fill in and complete, and then we can sort of look at getting numbers and planning for our next event, which are basically the programs for the boot camps in October and December. But has anyone got any questions? Amelia, maybe possibly Mr. Hui, who of course is our partner for this. Just give you a minute. Mr. Hui, did you want to sort of say anything at all before we finish up?
Okay, so thank you very much for your presentations. So I think that, on behalf of the just, I would say that, on the Vietnamese side of Vietnamese team, I would like to say thank you very much for your presentation, which is excellent. So I think that only one thing, it is not, I would say that satisfied is that the interpretation is not good because just because technical matters. But anyways, I hope that next time when it will be much better for the the own audience. Okay.
Most definitely, and I should say also that there will be a transcript, a summary transcript in Vietnamese as well, which will also post on our site of today's recording for anyone who didn't understand anything fully. And again, apologies for not having the translation sort of for today, but we will be doing that definitely for the future program events. So that will be something that we'll be making a priority. Are there anyone else who has any questions at all? Okay, and I just thank you, Ms. Lai, just mentioning that VCCI is very happy to promote the event in terms of its members as well, and similarly in terms of I believe Vietnam Startup Incubator, it's FAM. Thank you for your contributions, and also Ms. Wang from Hanoi University, and Ms. Lan from University of Medicine and Pharmacy. So if anyone I've sort of missed, please, as I said, we'll have the information on our site, and I'll just post our site up there again. Program details. So without any further questions then, basically, I might then bring today's session to a close. It's been a great launch, and again, thank you to all our great speakers, to Rebecca, to Matt, for fantastic sort of discussions, and to Mr. Hui from Dongsan for his great support, and also obviously to DFAT for their overall support in terms of the program, and to other partners in terms of VCCI and AusCham as well. And to all of you, of course, for participating. We would hope to see you all back for our events coming up. And as I said, we'll be going out to the market. If you can go back, because we haven't had the opportunity to capture everyone's details in this. So if you have registered individually, please let myself or Alex Asenzo, the incubator manager, who's been online, and know, or Mr. Hui, in terms of your details, so we can capture those and make sure you're fully apprised of any future events, or to go back through the groups that, whether it be Austrade, RMIT, AusCham, VCCI, or the different groups that you've been talking with, just to make sure that you aren't sort of missed
Thank
out.
you.
So look, thank you all. It's been a fantastic event. Really appreciate your time and your contributions, and we'll look forward to seeing you very soon.
Thanks all. Take care.
Thanks, Rob. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.